Stay tuned at the end of the video for a reading from the Havimal. You know, there's something that is extremely important in an RPG. Your character. How it looks and how it plays. I don't want to talk about how it looks, about how I feel the allied races are sort of a letdown. Today, I'm going to talk about how it plays. I can save how they look for another video. Think about your main class, if you still play WoW, of course. And think it back to an expansion when your class felt good. When you felt like its name was actually what you were playing. When did you love Arms Warrior? Did you say Mists of Pandaria? Probably. And if you didn't play Mists of Pandaria, you probably would have liked it there. When did you love Feral Druid? Did you say Warlords of Draenor? Well, Feral was at the top of its game in Warlords of Draenor. Hasn't really recovered since. I could talk about priests, warlocks, well, any Specker class. In the Legion expansion, they attempted to recover the class fantasy. That was the entire reason behind the lore-driven artifact weapons. They attempted to recapture what it meant to be your class. However, that was short-lived. In Battle for Azeroth, most people felt their class was worse off than Legion. Most fantasies were destroyed. Class fantasy and bring the player attitude by Blizzard that started in Wrath of the Lich King is, well, still there, but not nearly what it used to be. Which is why things like bear tanks really started to pick up in Wrath of the Lich King. All the classes seemed to at least perform well. They really came into their identities in Wrath of the Lich King, which is why a lot of people liked the expansion. Of course, you would still stack classes for min-maxing or trolling. For example, like 5 Boomkin Arenas, which was really fun. I never really saw people say, oh, that class sucks. That class, don't bring that class, they're useless. And some of these classes, well, when they got more popular in Wrath of the Lich King, things such as Feral Druids. Why they eventually became awful and clunky. You see, Feral Druids weren't underperforming in Wrath of the Lich King, but they did require skill. This was by design. Blizzard themselves have even came out saying, you know, we wanted Death Knights to feel a little easier. If there's something that you wanted to play more difficult, Feral Druids are waiting for you. A bunch of people complained. So, they made glyphs that made Feral easier. But then they decided glyphs were a bad idea. And well, they couldn't keep Feral the way it was. I blame Mythic Plus for this. But Feral has just been garbage and hasn't recovered since. Now it's a little off topic, but it's still at least an explanation to one of the classes and why they don't feel good in BFA. Blizzard refuses to rework the Feral Druid. I think they should still use energy, but maybe not so much combo point heavy. Let's take Druid tanks for another example. In Legion, the class design was more health than absorption. Simple, could be done easily, quite easily. There are still questionable abilities like why is Moonfire or Lunar Beam still a thing, which doesn't seem to fit the class fantasy of a bear at all. But most people didn't pick one of those because they didn't have to. In BFA, they removed the more health. Absorbing is nowhere near what it was. They removed these in order to make every tank feel the same, to help with balancing. I remember Blizzard also said in an interview that if they make the classes easier to play, then they can make the fights harder. Well, Blizzard, this was an awful decision. Let's say you raid 2 nights a week, 3 hours a night. I understand that some people raid way longer, and I don't know, but perhaps some people raid shorter. I wanted to do it this way so we can at least appeal a little more to the casual audience. But let's just say this. These numbers are just basically a base. So we can even say 6 to 8 hours a week for the casual group of how much they're raiding. 8 hours of these hard fights, which I use hard as the air quotation marks, because let's be honest, it's not until maybe some heroic fights or mythic fights where you really start to see these hard fights. These are not including dungeons, but again, Mythic Plus is a lot higher. Once you learn the fights with your easy class, it won't do the game justice. 99% of the time, you're not in these situations. It's no wonder people are leaving BFA in the dust so quickly. You see, Blizzard is pushing these world quests, they're pushing island expeditions, they're pushing all of these activities that aren't these hard fights. So when your class becomes too simple or too boring, All of these situations are completely irrelevant to their decision. You see, they made classes easier, but they didn't make the content in the outdoors for everything else harder. Therefore, you're stuck playing a boring, easy class in a easy environment, and it's just not fun. They feel like their class doesn't matter or has been neglected, with a few exceptions, of course. It feels like what made their class unique or special has been betrayed for homogenization and easier class balance. It's easier to balance specs if they all function near the same, right? It's easier for them, more boring for us. I've seen very few people who love their class in BFA. If you do, that's awesome. More power to you. For me, after playing a druid for 12 years, I honestly don't have it in me to reroll, or to keep playing. Perhaps there's really not a point in playing the expansion in the first patch anymore. Wait until the expansion's half off, the last patch, and enjoy everything before the next expansion comes out. If beta for Azeroth has taught me anything, it feels like the days of polished expansions are behind us, and Class Fantasy, well, we're unfortunately going to have to wait for another expansion where it's a feature. It's such a shame, because the story is, well, interesting. There's a lot of plot holes, but it's at least interesting. The raids are fun. Of course, the fights are a lot better. Island expeditions are boring. Mythic Plus, well, basically just doing the dungeon but harder, right? I mean, I'm not really having fun anymore. But it's not because of the content's too hard, or it's not that the content's not exactly that boring. It's just that my class is boring. It's about how my class plays. Now, of course, this is only 50% of it for me. The other half of it is the race, the looks, the feel of the characters, the lore. All of that matters to me. It's not just the way the class plays. I guess it is easy to criticize Blizzard. They do have a tough job. I mean, the art team has to make more class sets than ever before. Oh, wait, no, they don't. They have to balance more specs than ever before. We'll go with that one, yeah. They have to do that. They have to balance more specs than they've ever had before. But that's not an excuse to make everyone feel the same. Why can't druids have more health? Maybe they get hit a little harder. Maybe they don't dodge. Maybe they just absorb damage. Maybe that's their class fantasy. Death Knight self-healing could be a thing. Monks should be able to dodge a lot more. And warriors, well, you should be a walking tank. You should be able to dodge or block or mitigate more damage than any of the other tanks. Maybe to sacrifice AoE damage, or maybe to do something different. I think that they should give paladin tanks as a two-hander to use. Why not? And give them a two-hander and a shield. Meaning that their damage is through the roof, but they get hit a little harder. You could have niche abilities. You could have niche fights for every tank. I'm saying it's best to have a druid tank for this, but you're not going to kill your group if you have a paladin tank. See, now the issue is that when you get to high-end Mythic Plus, it's bring a Death Knight. Bring a monk, when even monks aren't even that much up there anymore. And it's such a shame that the game feels this way. It's such a shame that they have so much potential everywhere to make the game amazing. All these classes have potential. The way they play, the class fantasies. There are so many ways they could make the game better, but they just prefer to make it easier on themselves. You see, what made Wrath of the Lich King was so great wasn't that they wanted to make the classes easier. It wasn't that they wanted to make everything feel the same. They wanted to make everything feel different. The story was solid. The classes were solid. And while, yeah, Wrath had its own issues, so does every expansion. But that's when the classes really came into their own. That's when you felt different. When you can bring yourself to the table and still do well. You could play any spec you want to and not be left in the dust like Feral Druids in the first patch or Shamans. And while it is only first patch, it's still unacceptable for Blizzard to behave this way. For our classes to feel like they have no specialty behind them. Isn't that why we play different classes? To feel completely different? I understand they all have to have similar abilities, but make them function in different ways. They're working on making the classes look better, and that's fantastic. Now, if they can only make the races look good. I've been extremely negative towards Blizzard, and even I know that it's dumb. It doesn't feel right, but if we don't say anything, It's never going to stop. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope that at least you agree with something, or if you feel like you need to vent about your class in the comments, please do, because I want to know. After a few hundred days played on a character, are you prepared to switch because Blizzard just doesn't care? Let me know in the comments below, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And again, stay tuned for a reading from the Hobby Mall. So I'm going to do something a little different for you guys today. I'm going to read a passage from the Hobby Mall. Basically, a Norse religious book. I can go into more detail throughout stories of Norse if you wish to. But if you liked this segment, let me know. Let me know in the comments. Just say Norse if you liked it. It's going to be extremely different from what I normally do. But this is me wanting to, I guess, branch out a little bit, to do things a little bit differently, to find my own flavor on things. But I want to read to you guys a quote from the Hobby Mall. That's what I'm going to do. And then I want to talk about how it relates to our life, how it relates to everything, and hopefully inspire or just something cool to talk about. I wish I could read it in Old Norse, but I would just embarrass myself. The mind knows alone what is nearest the heart, and sees where the soul is turned. No sickness seems to the wise so sore, as it not to know content. I believe that in our society today, a lot of people decide to act with their hearts and not their minds. The heart does love, yes, but it is the mind that decides what you love, what type of partner you like. Your interests, such as guns or video games, or history, or animals. Now, the mind will decide when your soul is becoming corrupt. You will know, but your heart will not. I feel like sometimes you have to betray your heart in order to forge a better life, to leave an abusive partner. You hear that all the time of, why don't you just leave? No, it's their mind that tells them they want to leave, but it's their heart that says no. I believe in order to forge a good life, you need to stand upon the anvils of honor and strength. That one is useless without the other. In order to have strength, to pursue honor, you must act with your mind, not your heart. The worst part about evil is it believes it is good. That is the worst thing. We like to think of evil as the total opposite of logic. We like to think of evil as this thing that likes to do evil for the sake of evil. But the greatest evils on our planet have been because they thought they were doing what was right. They followed their heart and not their minds. To be content is to know what you want to love, to pursue that, and to claim it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope that this was at least interesting. I'll see you guys later.